These funds operated for just 6 months. The inception of this fund was in June 2024, and operations of 6 months of the fund delivered a risk-adjusted annualized return of 58% to the investors. This fund is a special equity fund. An equity fund is an investment vehicle that dedicates spreading the assets under management in building a portfolio of equities. Equities are shares or stocks of companies. And for purposes of ensuring security to investor funds, these funds only invest in listed securities. These are shares or stocks of companies that are listed in stock exchanges. And because this is an Africa equity special fund, then these funds only invest in companies that are listed across the African stock exchanges, Nairobi Stock Exchange included. It also has a portion of its asset under management invested in offshore markets. And the reason is that some of the companies that are invested into have cross-listed. They are also listed in stock exchanges outside the African continent. And that gives us an exposure, or the investors in these funds get an exposure to a diversified market. If you're an investor looking forward to investing in high return, high liquid stocks of carefully selected companies, not in Kenya, but in the African market, that exposure, you are getting it by investing in these Africa Equity Special Fund, which is benchmarked on the S&P Africa 40 Index. This fund is under the management of Arvocap Asset Managers. Arvocap Asset Managers is a registered and regulated fund manager by the Capital Markets Authority, and this fund, the Arvocap Africa Equity Special Fund, is also registered and regulated by the Capital Markets Authority. And therefore, investing in these funds, you are secure because of that level of regulation. Arvocap Asset Managers is under the able leadership of Madam Monica Mwaniki. Madam Monica Mwaniki has a vast experience spanning over a decade with a specialty in fixed income investments. She has served before in Dyer and Blair Investment Bank, and she was an associate of Standard Investment Bank, the proprietor of Manza X. In 2018, she trailblazed with her contribution in investment banking, and she was awarded during the Investment Banking Awards in 2018. The Chief Investment Officer is this gentleman, Mr. Wilson Wariari. Mr. Wilson boasts of over a decade of experience with a specialty in offshore investments, particularly derivatives and futures. The Chief Operation Officer is Priyanka Shah, also with a vast experience in investment banking and offshore investments. That alone points towards their contributions and specialty to this kind of investments. Funds as a medium-term to long-term perspective on equities, offering a high return and strategic positioning in investments. We shall be looking at the specific details of this fund and its asset allocation after 3 seconds short break, so don't go away. In the meantime, if you are new to this channel, give us your subscription and make sure you hit the notification button so that when we upload our next value-packed video, YouTube will send you a notification. Give us a like to this video, engage us in the comment section, and don't forget to share the video to another person because those parameters are very important in helping the algorithm push this video to other interested persons and helping us achieve the objectives of the channel of delivering financial literacy to as many people as possible. See you after 3 seconds, short break. Welcome back and thank you for your like and your comment. From this schedule, the fund name is Africa Equity Special Fund, meaning that this is a fund that is invested in shares, stocks, or equities of various companies across the African markets that are listed in the African stock exchanges, Nairobi Stock Exchange included. And for that reason, investing in this fund, your investment is exposed in a diversified or spread investment across many companies, that minimizing your risk exposure. The fund manager is Arvocap Asset Managers, and as we covered in the introduction, Arvocap Asset Managers is a fully registered and regulated fund manager by the Capital Markets Authority. The product itself, that is the Arvocap Africa Equity Special Fund, is also registered as required in law and regulation and regulated by Capital Markets Authority. The fund inception, or this fund, started in June of 2024 and therefore has been in operation for about 10 months to date. And for the period that ended in June 2024, that is the period under consideration for this annualized risk-adjusted return of 58%. The base currency for this fund is the Kenyan currency. A base currency is the currency under which the fund manager distributes the returns from the investment to the investors. But remember, the fund is invested across Africa stock exchanges with different currencies. So the investment currencies are different depending on the markets where these assets are invested, but the base currency, those returns from those investments, are shared to the investors in the fund in Kenya shillings. The custodian, or the fund ecosystem, the custodian is NCBA, who also double as the trustees, and the auditors are Kingori Kamau and the company certified public accountants. The benchmark for this fund, its performance is benchmarked to the S&P Africa 40 index. The fund, being registered and regulated by the Capital Markets Authority, has registered initial investment for this fund as per the registration by the regulator is 100,000 Kenya shillings equivalent. And because it has a dedication to the South African market, then that translates to 15,000 ZAR and top-ups of a minimum of 10,000 ZARs. The locking period, or once you invest in this fund, your investment shall not be accessible, or they are locked for investment, and that is to ensure that you are getting the maximum returns out of investment and the nature of the product. The investment shall be locked for a minimum of 6 months. And this does not apply only to the initial investment. Any additional top-ups that you contribute or you invest in this particular fund will also enjoy that locking period of 6 months. So it applies, the locking period shall be applying to every investment that you make to this particular fund. The investment attracts a management fee of 2% per annum, which is prorated. There is an entry fee of 0.5%, and again, this one will be applying to any investment that you are making to this fund. And this is to distinguish to the most common known investments in the money market funds and the fixed income funds. The performance fee applicable to this fund is a 20%, which is applicable to the total net return from investments. The fund does not have a target performance or an hurdle rate. The regulator, as we have indicated, the fund is regulated and registered by the Capital Markets Authority, as well as the fund manager is also registered and regulated by the Capital Markets Authority. Risk categorization for this particular fund, the fund is risk categorized at level 6, which indicates is a high risk fund. In terms of risk categorization, when money market funds are categorized number 2, it does not mean that this kind of a fund is 6 times riskier when compared with such lower ranked or categorized funds. No. Risk categorization looks at the many exposures in terms of risk, and the specific risks related to this type of a fund will include hedging risks, liquidity risks, we have market risks, we have financial risks, and also currency risks. And a good example is that when you have done an investment in company shares or equities, you cannot liquidate such investment in a short notice without suffering losses. The same way, the fund being invested in various currencies and with global currency fluctuations, that form gives an exposure to this kind of a fund. It is also investing in different markets, which not only gives an exposure, but exposure to different markets and different currencies that also gives a level of diversification that minimizes the exposures to good extent. And therefore, a categorization of 6 does not mean that the fund is 6 times riskier compared to other funds. This is a good investment if you have been looking for exposure to the equity markets and you are not ready to invest directly or as a DIY investor in the stock exchange. Above that, this fund is exposing you to a diversified investment, not only about the different listed companies, but also the markets. You are getting exposed to different stock exchanges, including the offshore markets. The assets under this fund, under the Arvocap Africa Equity Special Fund, are spread out with 75% of the asset under management targeting the African listed securities and offshore equities targeting a 15%, while the 10% shall be held in cash and cash equivalent as distributed in this schedule. For Arvocap asset managers, as the fund manager managing this fund, for them to realize this kind of a return, they have a strategy to engage actively in managing the asset allocations with an equity portfolio of high-quality African businesses in various stock exchanges across the African markets. For a company to qualify for investment by the fund manager considers the nature of the underlying business, and a huge portion of its revenues must be derived from the African market, and the company has to have a strong balance sheet using the cash and the cash equivalent as a control tool, trader of options, and restricting investments into a single stock to a 5%, including the fund appreciations. And that is to give a diversification or a spread into its investments that keeps the exposure to risks low. If you're interested in investing in this special fund, consider doing a further individual research before your investment. Thank you for watching and see you in our next video.